It seems to me, first of all, from what I understand from doctors, that's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
And when it comes to establishing your worldview, I was curious, what newspapers and magazines did you regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand the world?
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
But like what ones specifically? I'm curious that you...
all of them, any of them that have...
Can demonic spirits attach themselves to inanimate objects? The answer is yes.
Welcome to Twat Waffle of the Week.
Two wrongs don't make a right. That's all I'm going to say. As I said in the primary TWATs video for this week, I still have a bunch of stories I'd like to highlight. So, without further ado, this first clip I'm not sure how to approach. As per usual, this segment is full of McKay's fantasies and his violent rhetoric. Whether he is advocating for such action or just puffing his chest, I will let you decide. Quote, "I'm gonna rain this shitstorm down on all these scumbags until they're dead."
You are now in this war. That's why you're here. Are you gonna answer Christ's call? Are you gonna be part of the ascending Christ consciousness on this planet so we bury this satanic architecture which has infiltrated every aspect of society? The Khazarian Mafia has been killing you. They're now killing you in hospitals. They're killing you in the streets. They launched Antifa and BLM. That's when I blew the gasket. That's when I said, okay, no governor, no president, no state legislature is going to say it. Then I'm going to say it. I'm going to come out and I'm going to rain this shitstorm down on all these scumbags until they are dead.
And FYI, this is right-wing Christian family values in action. The dismissive attitude James spread is appalling. His overall reaction to the Secret Service report, see show notes for link, is basically to blame women. And just so you're aware, this clip is longer than what I normally like to include, but I think it's important.
The Secret Service examined a 2018 shooting at a yoga class in Tallahassee, Florida, in which a man killed 2 women and wounded 6. So I just want to point this out. So if you look at the headline of this article, it says, "Incels are a rising threat in the U.S. Secret Service report finds." A rising threat in the U.S. Now, when I've read through this article twice, okay, there's no statistics on how the threat is rising. There's no statistics outside of a couple of different stories that they mention in the Secret Service report. Within the Secret Service report itself, it says nothing about increase. It says nothing about rise. Here's what it says. It says the behavioral history of the hot yoga Tallahassee attacker illustrates many of the behavioral threat assessment themes identified through the years of U.S. Secret Service research examining targeted violence. Further, this attacker history highlights this specific threat posed by misogynistic extremism. I am a misogynistic extremist. You know, when that one reporter asked me how I should label myself, instead of saying Christian nationalist, I should have said a misogynistic extremist. I'm a misogynistic extremist. This gender-based ideology, sometimes referred to as male supremacy. I am a male supremacist. Has received increased attention in recent years from researchers, government agencies, and advocacy groups due to its association with high-profile incidents of mass violence. You know, once again, I mean, Who can blame these guys? Who can blame young guys nowadays? Who can blame them? Once again, I mean, you just look at, and I drive past, and I see, walking through the mall or walking through shops, and I see how these young women talk. We see how they act. We see it in the numbers. Like I said, a body count of 20 for chicks nowadays is like low. It's low. And then they just jump from dude to dude to dude. It's just a mess. And then outside of that, how are you supposed to meet someone today? Like, I can't even imagine how young men can meet someone today. Like back when I was younger. I'm a young guy, by the way. I'm only 35. Just 5 years ago, I was still in my 20s, technically. Okay, so let's just put that out there right away. Second of all, when I was younger, and this was, I got married when I was 20, had my first kid at 21. But when I was like 19, 20 years old, there was none of this, like, a lot of this stuff was a lot less, right? And you can go back 20, 30 years ago, and it was a lot less than that. And you just look at, like, the transformation of women over time. Someone should do this, right? Someone should do this. Look at how women dressed, and there probably is some graphic like this. But if you look at how women dress, going back to like 1940, 1950, and then sort of like the transformation each and every decade all the way up until today, it's just gotten worse and worse over time. In my opinion, I mean, in the opinion of a lot of Catholics, traditional Catholics, like women, my wife does not agree with this, but women shouldn't even wear pants. That's what a lot of traditional Catholics believe. And we're sort of trying to work up to that. We'll see what happens. But then if you just go back to like when I was young, when I was a kid, when I was trying to meet someone, or when I was like meeting up with girls or whatever, there was none of this like dating app stuff. There was none of this swipe left, swipe right, Snapchat shit. You had to like actually go and talk to someone in person. So a lot of this sort of, all of this together has made a lot of things worse. And it's mainly affected men, by the way. Men are discriminated against in family court. Men are discriminated against in the media, and they're discriminated against in society as a whole. And they see the way that women act, and they see the way that women treat them, and they see the way that women jump from guy to guy to guy to guy. And so how can you blame them for wanting to sit inside their room and play video games and sort of get lost in a digital universe of their own? And then you see them lash out sometimes. I mean, how can you really blame a guy?
While James mentions what he considers to be the shortfalls of the article he read, he forgets that the Secret Service report is a case study. Essentially, it's a glorified anecdote. Case studies are typically reports of some single event. Therefore, hence the lack of examples. I should also interject that I believe it's a thorough case study and it's well worth to read. In his screed about lack of numerical data, James reads past this statement in the Secret Service report. Quote,
"It is further important to note that misogynistic violence is not restricted to high-profile incidents of mass violence. Misogyny frequently appears in more prevalent acts of violence, including stalking and domestic abuse."
End quote. In other words, tracking such data may be more difficult. Like the first clip, it's not sitting well with me. I believe Kyle Mantalia notes quite aptly, quote,
He, James, dismisses the threat of misogynistic extremism, blamed women for any hatred directed at them, and defended men who lash out violently, asking, "How can you really blame the guy?"
End quote. This next story I get a royal chuckle from, as it is a Pratt, point refuted 1,000 times, from ages ago. You would think the QOP would have learned by now. To be redundant, quote,
Just one problem. The iconic line appears nowhere in the U.S. Constitution, as most students learn in 5th grade social studies. It's in the Declaration of Independence.
End quote. The thought of Sarah Palin as a Congress grader is not very appealing. About as appealing as Michelle Bachmann making a comeback. Granted, it would be a House seat, but that thought is chilling.
We lost Don Young, America lost Don Young as a 49-year representative, House of Representatives from the state of Alaska. Now, last time you were here, you made some news, and when I asked you, would you ever consider elected office again, and you said yes, and that may have been the first time we heard that in a long time. Let me ask you right here on this show, and we've been friends a very long time, are you ready to announce a run for that seat, that Don Young seat for House of Representatives from Alaska?
Oh my goodness, think of those huge shoes that are to be filled when we consider Don Young's longevity and his passion, his love, his fighting spirit for our wonderful state of Alaska and for the nation as a whole. If I were asked to serve in the House and take his place, I would be humbled and honored, and I would. Yeah, in a heartbeat, I would. We'll see how this process is going to go in terms of filling that seat, but it would be an honor.
So, one question I get asked frequently is why I pay attention to all this tripe. Ignoring my bizarre fascination, I am surrounded in my everyday life with people who take what the talking heads speak as the gospel. Literally, some people put it before the actual gospel, but that's a whole nother story. My thinking has always been to be forewarned is to be forearmed. Now, Foster's tweet has since been removed by Twitter, basically for a TWATs violation. But this is what he wrote according to a screenshot by the Mississippi Free Press. What is sick and twisted is Foster's sad attempt for clarification. We know what he really meant. He basically got the message the first time. And yes, you did mention the transgender community and allies. What the fuck do you think, quote, and pretend men are women is exactly to me? I find his words repulsive, as it seems like an odd position for a, quote, man of faith. But I have heard this argument before from men who prefer to behead people. And I should note, Mr. Foster, before you start complaining about someone's house, clean your own. So this woman, Connie Ure, is facing some shit for something she posted on Facebook. Just an FYI, this post has since been deleted. The issue with this statement and why she is facing a federal lawsuit Allegedly, Yuri has denied rooms in the hotel. As noted by Stunson at the Kansas City Star, quote,
under Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a place of public accommodation cannot discriminate based on race, color, religion, or national origin. And by Yuri's allegedly discriminating against Native Americans, they violated the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that grants all citizens the same benefits, privileges, terms, and conditions, according to the lawsuit.
This is another story to keep my tabs on, as many Canada flags are already being waved. And last but not least, at best I would like to place Fowler Arthur's comments within the uninformed category. The fact that she nor her staff are returning any contact attempts to clarify are quite concerning. There are no two sides to this debate.
Before my Zoom interview with Representative Sarah Fowler Arthur, I asked for her to turn on her camera. She declined to do so. About 23 minutes into our conversation, I asked a question about the financial aspect of the bill. When attempting to talk about the funding, she brought up the Holocaust.
You should talk about these atrocities that have happened in history, but you also do have an obligation to point out the value that each individual brings to the table.
The interview with Fowler Arthur left us with questions about some of her statements she made about the Holocaust and how this important part of world history would be taught under House Bill 327. After multiple editorial meetings with the News 5 team, we decided to share the interview with the Anti-Defamation League, the Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage, and the Ohio Education Association.
There are moments in our history where there is not two sides to debate. There's a right side and a wrong side.
In the case of the Holocaust, we're talking about state-sponsored mass murder.
Here is some of what Fowler Arthur said.
What we do not want is for someone to come in and say, well, obviously the German government was right in saying that an Aryan race is superior to all other races, and therefore that they were acting rightly when they murdered hundreds of thousands of people for having a different color of skin.
James Pash with the Anti-Defamation League is concerned that Fowler Arthur is unaware of how many people were murdered and why. And Dahlia Fisher with the Maltz Museum is worried that the representative believes Judaism is a race.
And the significance of this is that Hitler and the Nazis were the ones who categorized the Jews into a race. I would say that if someone was to use that language today, it would be an act of anti-Semitism.
There's no baseline of even education there that 6 million Jews were systematically murdered and millions of others. I can't think of a more important need or call out for the need of increased education.
Then Fowler Arthur made statements about hearing multiple points of view on the Holocaust.
Or maybe you're listening to it from the perspective of a Jewish person that has gone through the tragedies that took place. And maybe you listen to it from the perspective of a German soldier.
Of the German soldiers or the Nazis, would she feel the same way about like 9/11? Does she want the perspective of the hijackers who flew the planes into buildings? No, because there's moral absolutes, right? And so there aren't two sides.
After our conversations, we tried to follow up with Fowler Arthur. Hi, this is Morgan Trout. We called and left voicemails and sent numerous emails to her and her team, detailing the major concerns that the organizations brought up. We also texted and even sought her out at the State House, including Tuesday morning at a committee hearing. Her team refused to do follow-up interviews to allow her to clarify her comments and help our viewers understand how this bill could impact the teaching of subjects like the Holocaust. Now, educators are concerned about the potential implications of the unclear bill.
Very frustrated when politicians make decisions about what happens in our classrooms and don't trust the judgment of teachers.
Sarah Fowler Arthur was previously on the State Board of Education, but has never participated in the public school system as a student or as a parent. She was homeschooled and never attended college. Each of the organizations I spoke to say they want to keep education in the hands of the educators. At the State House, Morgan Trout, News 5.
Our thanks to Morgan for that. And to hear the full version of Fowler Arthur's comments, go to about the Holocaust. Just go to our website. That's news5cleveland.com.
What concerns me is her lack of awareness that she is repeating Nazi propaganda. Judaism, or being Jewish, as a race, comes straight from Hitler. Quote,
through inbreeding for thousands of years, often in very small circles, the Jew has been able to preserve his race and his racial characteristics much more successfully than most of the numerous people among whom he lives.
End quote. This is just one example. It's actually one of his first writings on the idea of race. For a good dose of this crap, read Mein Kampf. It's full of such stripe as this. And with that, I bring this episode to a close. Hopefully, this week won't be so jam-packed with stories that I want to cover. But if we end up in the same boat, so be it. I'll deal with it, just like I dealt with this week. Peace out, y'all.